This is Cairo. We're coming from Studio 3. My name is Dr. Amr Mabrouk. Dua Muhammad is at the control. And this is World of Info for 1 hour. And today we are very proud and we are very honored to have with us Her Excellency Ambassador Angelina Eichhorst, the Ambassador of the European Union in Cairo, a very distinguished diplomat who has a degree in international relations and political science, a master's degree in law, a master's degree in languages of the Middle East, who served the EU in Lebanon, Syria and Jordan, and also before that she worked in the United Nations and served in Somalia. I mean, such a very rich CV. Thank you for coming, Excellency. It's really very much appreciated that you had the time and effort to come to Radio Cairo. A great honor, really, to have you with us this beautiful afternoon.
Thank you, Dr. Mabrouk. I'm very, very happy to be here.
It's a great pleasure and honor because we are talking about European Union. Some people would be amazed and say, oh, this is something new. This is a union between European nations after being divided forever. Actually, they were not that divided. And history says that there was a man who had a vision by the name of Charlemagne and who was the resurrection of the Roman Empire. He built an empire and he had a pope called Leo III, not the 14th, who has given him the throne in the year 800 and had Europe, all of it, united under his jurisdiction from 800 till 814 and as an emperor. So this is a very far-fetched dream to unite Europeans into a one state like the times of Charlemagne. So when we talk about the EU, it's a political and economic union that has almost all of Europe geographically, with 27 states and 450 million people, 4,250,000 kilometers, and people who are standing in a row. 10 countries wants to join the EU, one country left. That is the British or the Britain, and it has 24.6 of the nominal GDP of the whole world. So how does such a dream happen?
It is a long story, as you said, going back to Charlemagne for sure, maybe even before, and we can talk about where Europe comes from. I would like the listeners to go one day when they go to Brussels in Belgium to go to the European House of History. It's new. It's maybe 5-7 years old. And there you can literally walk through the whole history, which goes way back even before Charlemagne.
Of course, yes.
But the political history, you're absolutely right. It is young. It is new in a way. And you can also see it's really a project that continues to grow and to develop. You mentioned 10 want to join, there are even more, and we can talk about that. But I think the real start with the pioneers. Some call them the founding fathers. As a woman, I like to talk about pioneers, rather, if you don't mind.
Of course.
You know, I feel strongly about this. But it's true that these were men like De Gasperi, Spinelli, Schumann, Mansholt, who at that time, Jean Monnet, who really were sitting together after the Second World War and saying, no more bloodshed.
Yes.
We don't want this anymore. It was very visionary and it was very courageous to do that at the time.
And I think that the presence of two very important characters that are really out of this world, and I mean real giants, in spite of, one of them was a real giant on that is de Gaulle in terms of height, de Gaulle and Adenauer.
Yeah.
And they say if de Gaulle was not a prisoner of war in the First World War, he would have never comprehended and understood the German culture and education and heritage. And if Adenauer did not go to the jails and prisons of Hitler, he would have never become so much understanding of what unites Germany and France, and to lead the way of the whole of European Union into one mega state. So these two important leaders have founded, beside the politicians and beside the pioneers, not the godfathers, not the founding fathers, these pioneers like Schuman and all these people really had the vision. Because in the World War II, we have seen two wars, devastating wars, in the 20th century, and we have seen that has torn Europe upside down. And there was a war in 1870, and there was the Napoleonic War in the early 19th century. So we have actually 4 devastating wars that tore Europe apart, and yet people had vision, people had hope.
And they had a vision also for the whole continent. In a way, they were 6 at the time. They started as 6. But it was very clear from the Schuman vision and what we are celebrating this year, 75 years of Schuman Declaration. He actually had a vision for the whole continent. How, sometimes people ask me how many countries, when will it stop? But you can see that it is an evolving project. It went from 6 to 9 to 10 to 15 to 24 to now 28 we had, and back to 27, but we will continue to grow. And it is because countries really want to be part of this, what marks the European Union very strongly, which is a single market.
Yes. In the beginning it was called the European market, the European common market. It was never called the European Union.
Exactly.
And we, both of us, we have reached our teens hearing always the word European market, always goes to economics. It never stated that it is going to be, it's a far-fetched dream to be a real European Union with a parliament and all this stuff.
That's true. But in the beginning, even those who were, let's say, the wishes of the pioneers, they wanted to work, for instance, on a defense union. And this was shut down. We know exactly how that happened. But today, if you look at, we are 2025, we are very strong on working towards a defense union. It took 75 years, a bit more. But at that time, you remember, we had the establishment of NATO, we had the Council of Europe, a number of institutions were established to make sure that we are connected to each other, and that also member states were ready to give up their sovereignty in some areas, some very difficult areas, but it starts always with the economy.
And some of these states have even turned down their neutrality.
Yes.
Of hundreds of years, of century or more,
Indeed.
and accepting to become a part of a defensive mechanism or a cooperative mechanism, whatever we can call it, is
very true. And some kept their neutrality,
Yes.
but actually, since we felt very strongly since the war, the aggression of Russia on Ukraine and on the continent, even those who are neutral, those countries, they said neutrality does not mean indifference. We still identify who are the aggressor and the aggressed.
Exactly.
So there is a strong will to work around security, to not have the war erupt again the way it were at the time. But we still had war on the continent. As you know, we had a huge war in the Balkans. We
Yes,
could not
I was just going to
avoid
say this. The presence of the European Union did not prevent, unfortunately, the Balkan War.
Yeah.
The seeds of the division were there. It was the dream of Tito to maintain a country that was never intended to be one country.
Indeed.
And this what once the gentleman died or passed away, things just went out of control.
Yes.
And suddenly all the possible hatred and all the possible discrimination was out of the box. And I feel very stunned, because I hope that this will never happen again. Because they are geographically acceptable to have a European Union, but there are 24 languages and a lot of different sects of Christianity. If we may say that the majority are Christians, but there are Orthodox Church, there is Catholic Church, there is the Protestant Church, and this can really not unite but may divide. So how can you maintain this union and keep it from being fragile?
But actually, what you are saying, we always say we are united in our diversity. It's the diversity that makes us united and strong.
Exactly.
You mentioned, we would call them minorities. It is a term that I cannot use here in this region. You cannot even use it in the Balkans any longer. But it's a legal term of protection for those communities who are not in the majority. We have at least 1,000 minority groups across the whole European
Yes.
Union. You say we have 24 official languages, but we have many, many more than 24. It's
Yes.
absolutely true. And still you find that people in their work and their search for identity, it's not just the language, it's not just the religion, it's also the feeling for the country, for your neighbor in the street, and it's not really going after feeling that you are more than the other. There's a very strong level of equality around the whole European Union. It's that project of feeling through the freedoms you're having in a market, the freedom as a person, of your goods, of your services, of your capital, that you feel you are equal. And it's not that one is more than the other. And this is how we could prevent a lot of possible conflicts today. Identity politics has come back.
Yes, because I think
unfortunately.
this is what Amr Mabrouk tried to write in his book about the killer identities, and he said that there has to be a unifying identity, not a dividing identity. If people accept that they identify themselves as human beings or as Europeans, this will make life much easier than saying I am a European, French, Catholic, or whatever. And this will the feeling of the majority of your identity going to Europe. This can be taught in schools, in social media, in everything, to make the integrity maintained.
Actually, what Amr Mabrouk did, and I had really the honor to be with him also in Lebanon before, and I read,
Such a distinguished man.
He is absolutely
amazing. He's the one who suffered the identity. He's the one who brought it up because he has seen it. Maroon, Catholic, and Melkanic, and French, and Lebanese, and writing in Arabic, writing in French. I mean, this is an international guy.
He introduced in his analysis strongly the concept of affiliation,
Yes.
and whether it is through language or whether it is through a cultural connection you feel. And that is really very good. As you say, it's a mixture. You can have different identities at the same time.
Yes, this is what
It's
he said.
fine.
That's what makes the book, 27 years later, still functioning as a good book, because he said you can have as much identities as you want, but keep one unifying identity, not one dividing identity.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's a very interesting concept in the EU, because you can ask many EU citizens in different countries how they feel, who they feel. I come from a country in the Netherlands. I'm born in the Netherlands, as you know. Identity, at some point they wanted to introduce a discussion about identity, but it didn't really work, because Dutch people, in a way, for them the identity question has never been a real issue. But if you go to other countries, particularly in countries where there are many so-called minorities, as you were alluding to, it is a very different subject, and it sometimes can be extremely sensitive. That's why we have a High Commissioner for Minorities also, that's not a European concept, it is at the United Nations level, but it's important to address those questions of people who feel that they are minorities, to address those questions, possible concerns, in a way that you are still fully part of society and of life.
Well, this is really very important, because I was reading the other day a book about the Finland experience, or Finnophilia, that is the love of Finland, because it's one of the happiest nations in the world. And they were trying, this group of researchers, and they were saying that what really makes Finland as a country that belongs to Europe, and at the same time a country that people are feeling happy, is the answer of the questions that are asked. How far are you satisfied of your life? How far you like where you are? What are your aspirations? Are your aspirations possible or not? I think this is what can bring the Europeans together, because if they feel that through their union they can become much happier, or much safer, or much belonging, then they will definitely choose always to be part of this union, right?
I think that's absolutely right, as you're saying. And if you look at the statistics on how people feel today about European Union, you have more than 3/4 of the whole continent's population. They feel very strongly that the European Union is important to keep us together. It's true we are in a war situation because of Russia, so that has increased the feeling how important the European Union is. But it's also true, and it has been for all these decades, in terms of quality of life, because people feel indeed that the issues you mentioned in terms of your own dignity, your own freedoms, it's a very much a concept, the value of freedom, dignity, equality, humanity.
Education, health, all this stuff.
Education, health, huge investment. Now we are more under pressure within the EU to spend much more on defense, and many people in the EU ask rightfully the questions, what does that mean for our quality of life if you spend so much money on defense? You know, we need to go up from, some still need to attain the 2% GDP, but many need to go up to 3.5%, and then the request is 5% even. So that may change, may not, because that's another subject altogether. But I think there is a European way of life that is appreciated by many people, because again they feel respected as human beings.
Of course, because the progress of how a European market has changed into a European Union by the Rome Treaty of 1957, the Maastricht Treaty of 1993, there is the role of also of two giants, not physically again, but one of them is physical this time. That is Kohl and President Mitterrand. I mean, they have shifted the physique, but these two gentlemen really were responsible for a Maastricht Treaty that really has paved the way to change into a real European Union, an entity that's not only based on economics. The Lisbon Treaty of 2007 as a treaty of reform, all this can really emphasize how the progress can happen. So if not for these pioneers, you think this could not have happened that fast? I mean, 75 years is in the history of the world. I mean, this is nothing. There have been wars, 30-year wars and things like that, right? So
75 years is a baby in historic terms. Yes. But it's interesting how you mentioned the couples. We talked about before Adenauer and de Gaulle, and then now you mentioned Kohl, Mitterrand. I could go further to mention Chancellor Merkel and President Macron as well.
Yes.
And you have fantastic photos of how these couples, so to say, shake hands. Sometimes there's a beautiful photo of Chancellor Merkel. She puts her head towards President Macron.
De Gaulle is the only one who allowed in his retreat was only Adenauer. He never allowed anyone to visit him in his home, his private home in the countryside. The only one who was allowed in was Adenauer.
There's a famous photo of Helmut Kohl and Mitterrand holding hands, holding hands very emotionally at Verdun, because, you know, it's always when you remember the wars and what happened, the suffering during the times when the two come together. But why do I mention it? And thank you for mentioning it, because European Union has always grown and moved forward with the axe of the Germans and the French. It is until today, yes, the European Union is larger, bigger, more countries, more leaders today, but the axe Germany, France is extremely important because they are the biggest economies, the biggest industries, and when they
the biggest
shake
conflicts,
hands,
they fought in the 19th century twice and in the 20th century twice, and they are the biggest part of the Charlemagne Empire. So this is really strange. And do you think that the Élysée Treaty of 1964 made the difference?
I think it was a very important.
Yes, because the fraternity up to the level of undersecretaries is really very, very important.
Totally. But so all these landmarks, if you look at the beginning, but let's look at Kohl and Mitterrand. Kohl at the time, he was the chancellor of the unification. In fact,
of course,
you remember how that time, and it would be interesting to listen to the ambassador of Germany on these. But I find it a fascinating period, also a period I lived physically myself, because the other ones, Treaty of Rome and before '64,
this was
it
100
was
years
another
before
time.
you were born.
No, not really. But what I'm saying is, it was a landslide, of course, what happened with the fall of Berlin Wall, and how. And you mentioned already the Balkans, how in fact everything opened up. Many countries wanted immediately to join the, at that time, European Union of only 15 member states. They wanted to be immediately part, because the ones before, like Portugal, Greece, Spain as well, who went through an internal transition internally, there was dictatorship. There were very difficult situations.
Definitely.
Before they became
there was
member.
a civil war in Greece in 1946.
Yes, and Spain also was really difficult. But the opening up to what we would call the Eastern European countries and the Balkan, that was a total game changer for the EU. And to have leaders at that time like Helmut Kohl, who took, he never wanted the unification to go very fast. He thought he can do that step by step, of Germany. But in fact, he had to, because also at that time, migration was very important. We can talk about migration because people always talk about migration and EU.
The second half of the program will be about this and about the cooperation between Egypt and the EU in this aspect. But let's talk more about Kohl before we go to the important part of Egyptian-European Union relations. So you think that these people out of size and out of this world, these giants, if we may use the expression, or these pioneers, have made a difference and helped definitely to reduce the time of the unification, right?
To reduce the time of unification of Germany, definitely. Kohl has led this process in a way. I think, I cannot speak for him, but if you read up on him, and I also read, of course, different bibliographies of German leaders, and I would also recommend Chancellor Merkel's.
Yes, I have the book. I want to start.
It's a big one, but it's fascinating, because I always look at how European women leaders, where they come from and how they lead. We always talk about men. I'm a feminist, so I really respect what but
Merkel
Chancellor
did.
Kohl did a fascinating leading of a process, and he had Mitterrand with him on this, which was not easy. He had the United States with him at that time, was not easy. The UK, Miss Thatcher at the time, she was not the most in favor of a united Germany, a reunited Germany. But it all worked out in the end, and it accelerated very much the progress. We had a difficult time economically at the time. If you go back to 92, at the beginning in the 90s, it was not an easy. People forget this. They always think.
It was very tough. I mean,
it was very tough.
And the economic condition of all the new states, European states that have been released from the East Bloc, they really have suffered. They've suddenly found all their savings just disappeared and demolished.
Yeah, and they all wanted. I know from the German side, they really wanted to be. East Germany wanted to be like West Germany at the time, and because people wanted to have the same quality of life and the same
standard. It was extremely difficult. The only thing that was good is that their number was less. They were 17 million, so this what made life a bit easier for Kohl to do. If imagine if this was the opposite, the number of people living in the East more than the West, this would have been economically almost impossible.
And it was a big economic challenge for Germany, and also for the whole. So we had, we didn't talk about it, but we have a very strong solidarity system within the EU. Until today, we have the majority of the budget goes in helping countries who still have to invest on their infrastructure, on human capital. It comes from the budget of the European
problem with the
Union.
depression that happened in Greece, you stood beside Greece so that it does not fall apart, and this was really a very important step forward. Yes, Greece is a very important pillar of the European Union.
So we had these giants, and I still think we have them, because that leadership also of today is absolutely crucial, that you have people who have the courage, the vision, to move ahead, to move fast. I always have this feeling people don't know exactly, they don't also feel exactly the speed of changing. It's the beauty of the EU. It's constantly adapting.
Exactly.
It's constantly changing. It's never standing still, because we have the saying in the EU, it's like on the bicycle, you have to continue to cycle, and you know what that means, because you cycle, but if you stop, you fall.
Exactly,
and the EU is really about constantly moving forward, also adapting to the fact that still, as I said in the beginning, and it's something I worked on for many, many years, I worked on the UK leaving the European Union, while I was in the same time in charge of bringing in new countries as members. So it was very contradictory in one way or the other.
Very emotional as well. Of course,
the Brexit vote was extremely emotional
Yes.
for many people working on the EU file in the EU institutions. I will never forget that morning with crying people in our house. Yes.
Well, it's. I know why they did it, and I couldn't understand it in the beginning, but they thought that they're losing a lot of their own benefits for the EU residents who are coming and swarming them. So this is what they felt, and that's why they voted twice for getting out of the European Union. But we can talk for hours, but the European Union is not an island in the world. It has a lot of relations with the rest of the world. And we are part of the rest of the world. So after the break, we'll talk about the very strategic partnership between Egypt and the European Union with Her Excellency Ambassador Angelina Eichhorst, the Ambassador of the EU in Cairo. We have her today as a very distinguished guest, and really a great pleasure to have you. Stay tuned to us in Radio Cairo, and we'll come right after the break. So you're still listening to Radio Cairo. My name is Dr. Amr Mabrouk. Da'a Mohammed is still at the control, and we are the World of Info. And today we have the pleasure and honor to have with us Her Excellency Ambassador Angelina Eichhorst, the Ambassador of the European Union in Cairo. And we talk about Cairo and the European Union because 2 months ago, almost, there has been a strategic partnership that has been done between President Sisi and the European Union. The Egyptian government has raised the relations to a higher level of partnership that was never there. Even the European Union does not have it with a lot of parties, and they have chosen to do the cooperation with our government, with our president. And I think, first of all, what's meant by a strategic partnership?
Very good. I'm really proud of this partnership. And as you said, we don't have many partners we have this strategic partnership with. In fact, if you look at strategically where the EU is investing in today, first it's Ukraine, for the reasons we know. Second, it's what? It's Egypt. And this is globally, I'm talking globally in terms of the volume of the funding we provide for Egypt today.
There's a 4 billion before 2 days ago, right?
This was indeed part of a bigger package, if you like, and then you talk about 7.5 billion in total. That was agreed between President von der Leyen and President Sisi, and it was a very strong signal from the European Union to Egypt, to the government of Egypt, to the people of Egypt, of saying, look, Egypt is so important strategically. Historically also, you know, we can go back to history, but we have very strong ties with Egypt since a long time. And it is true that for the past 10 years, as European Union, we had so many priorities, but we had not really focused a lot on some of our key partners we have in the world. And we decided, that was the decision of President von der Leyen, together with President Sisi, that Egypt is, in view of its history, but also in view of the challenges that the country has today, this is a strategic partner, meaning, of course, there is the financial support that goes with it, but it's much more than that. It's really that we discuss together what are the challenges of the country, and we know them for Egypt at the different levels. We know it in terms of the Suez Canal, the tourism, the remittances are there, but it is also in terms of what's happening around Egypt these days along your borders. This is big. This is not small at all, and we know that we want to therefore stand by Egypt in facing those challenges together.
Yes, there has been always a saying, Egypt is too big to fall, but why should we wait until it falls? We have to support Egypt, because the support of Egypt is support of the EU itself. The cooperation, I think, in the field of illegal immigration, the Egyptian Navy is doing a marvelous job of preventing. I mean, maybe 15 years ago or 20 years ago, sometimes there was a source of illegal immigrants coming from Egypt. But nowadays, with the security and the safety that the Egyptian Navy prevents, and it does not, and acts very humanely with the illegal immigrants, preventing them from using Egypt or Egyptian coasts as a sort of source of illegal immigration. This is, I think, is a very important job of Egypt.
It is first in view of how many actually guests or refugees Egypt hosts today. If you look at the
and
figures,
not in refugee camps. We don't have
not
refugee
in camps, not in tents. This is very important, and it is, if you look at the figures, you talk about 10 million people who come extra to the Egyptian population. This is a big burden, and we have also said as European Union we are shouldering this burden together with Egypt. You mentioned the Navy. I went to visit actually the Navy in Alexandria in terms of what is being done, what we call search and rescue. We have many requests from the government to help, to support, to protect the borders of Egypt, land borders, sea borders, because it's important. Every country has the full right and full entitlement to protect its borders, and for Egypt, given the length of the borders, this is crucial. But when back on the number of people who are seeking refuge in Egypt, this is a big burden, and Egypt takes this actually, if you like, as a holistic approach, trying to help address the root causes. Why do people come to Egypt in the first place, unfortunately? And we can talk about that, but we know very well the situation in Sudan, in the Sahel. Many people come and seek refuge in Egypt, but also in trying to make sure that Egyptian people themselves have here enough jobs, enough opportunities to stay in Egypt, so they don't need to go illegally trying to find somewhere else opportunities. And this is, I think, where Egypt has been asking very clearly European Union for support. It's not the only one. Traditionally, European Union has been giving a lot of advice, technical advice to the economy, to the fundamentals, as we say, of the economy to address these. So we work very strongly with the ministries of finance, of trade and investment.
And international cooperation, of course, with Dr. Rania.
International cooperation with Dr. Rania. I must say we have a fantastic cooperation with the current members of government at all levels. And I can tell you I've had just this morning I went to meet the Minister of Local Development. I'm constantly in touch with the ministers who have a very strong vision under the leadership of the Prime Minister, of course, and President Sisi, but who really see, and they tell us, look, these are our priorities, these areas we need. What is basically being asked for is a lot of technical knowledge and know-how into apply the latest methodologies of, for instance, being efficient on energy supply, on electricity, on water, infrastructure. This is really where we are true partners. And I want to repeat, we don't do this with every country in the region at all. And we see also, and I will close on that, but the huge potential Egypt has in this regard. And I think
what happened in the infrastructure in the past 10 years or 14 years has really seen a great advance. I mean, the condition of the roads in 2010 were so bad. Nowadays, as I always say, the tourists can come to Hurghada, spend one day in Cairo, one day in Memphis, one day in Thebes or Luxor, and they can come back in a very safe, easily paved roads, completely safe and maintenance. This helps very much, not just the progress of tourism, but also the progress of economic and industry and serving the industry and investment, right?
Very much so. In my last trip to Aswan, we had a team of our colleagues. They went by car, driving from Cairo to Aswan. And
almost 6 hours.
It's unbelievable, really.
Yes.
It's very good.
Remember the suffering that you have to do 12 hours or 14 hours to reach.
did that. I did it as a student in Egypt.
Yes.
And now it's a huge difference. I was in Alexandria. I can see, we try as much as possible to reach out to the governorates, also to discuss with the governors and with the different departments who indeed, where we are able to give what I would say the technical know-how in terms of construction, but then we are talking about quality construction and sustainable construction. This is very important.
The field of education, I think there is a cooperation. A lot of, as Muhammad Ali did, the training of the trainers. He sent a lot of scholarships, and Egypt has done that since the 19th century. We've been sending always people who, when they come back, they bring on them enlightenment. And so how far is the European Union active in this field of cooperation, of training of the trainers, educating the educators, enlightening? Because the enlightenment, definitely, one teacher who's trained well can really enrich the life of his students, hundreds and thousands of his students.
Thank you for mentioning that period. I wish I had lived at that time, honestly, and having had the chance to see indeed how Egyptian scholars went to Europe, vice versa, and writers and authors. You know, I have Taha Hussein next to my bed, reading on cultural.
I have family members. My father went to the UK for a study. My mother went to UK and Ireland to have her master's degree from there. So this is in the 60s and the 50s. So, and even to the America, one of my aunts went to have a PhD in Stanford in physical chemistry. So when you're talking about that, this is people who came back and did a lot of enlightenment. So how far is the European Union interested in sharing this science and continuing on this road?
You know, you make my day with this, because only yesterday I was with the Minister of Higher Education, I was at the launch of the Horizon. Europe Horizon, people know this very well in the academic world. It's top of the scientific, academic research and innovation exchange. And Egypt now is an associate member of Horizon. This is a huge achievement. It still has to be officially signed before the end of this year, but it means that you can have much more exchange between researchers, universities, scientists, academics, and that's exactly what we want. You know why? We know on the level of, but you have maybe also heard President von der Leyen, how much we now feel that science and real science has to be preserved, developed, invested in. It's for preserving humanity, but it's also, we feel there's so much to gain from that partnership. And you see, I go with my hands together, Egypt, European Union, because you have fantastically well deeply educated scientists here in the country,
exactly, yes.
And a huge potential. I've seen it also with young graduates from university. I saw it now in Aswan, Alexandria, but I will go around the country to the universities. They have brilliant ideas, fantastic ideas, proposals, also research proposals they want to work with. So we want to foster that exchange.
You know, the sky, Excellency, the sky is the limit, because once
I said that yesterday. Yes.
Once I was bragging with one of my friends who's a very well-informed gentleman. I told him, you know, I read a book yesterday that I think nobody has read it in Egypt. He said, stop bragging. They're 100 millions. At least 100 or 200 have read it. So this is the enlightenment. I mean, you never know how many people, or because of the internet and because of the availability of information on the internet, how many people are reading, how many people are getting more. Not everybody is just a social influencer, but there were a lot of people who are going in depth, trying to enrich themselves and enrich their souls with science. And I think reaching out for these special type of people, choosing them for the best possible scholarships, will help them to come back and pay back to their society. Definitely.
But I think it's something very particular for Egypt, because look at the scientists and the experts who work, as you said, abroad in Europe and later come back. But they're really the top of the top, whether it is in the EU and whether it is in different disciplines. You mentioned a few, or in the United States. I know this because it's this Egyptian professor, this Egyptian doctor, this Egyptian researcher. And that I must say, because you don't hear this from many countries. And I think it's so have that exchange and people coming back to Egypt. Yes. And then I think this is the best we can invest in.
Definitely, the investment in education, investment in scholarships this has to be really definitely emphasized. Tell us about bringing in two important pillars. That is, for example, tourism. How far is the European Union supporting this important sector? I mean, Egypt has eternal beauty, and it's one of the very few countries that you can just not have seashore tourism, but you can have historical, pharaonic, Islamic, Christians, everything is here in Egypt. So people, if they come just for 2 or 3 days, how much is the European Union trying or helping in investing in the field of tourism and letting the EU get involved in tourism?
I agree with you, and I'm now listening to you, I'm thinking, how many students in the European Union, if you would ask them which country you would love to visit, I bet with you Egypt is on top of the list.
I mean, you
for
told me
all the regions you mentioned.
You said that you were here when you were a student, university student.
Yeah.
That was a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah, but I remember when I learned, and this was still at the end of primary school, beginning secondary school, when I learned about the pharaohs in Egypt. And both my classmate and me were looking at each other saying, we're going to go there, right? Yes. That's today. I think we all agree. It's the current, what Egypt is offering currently, but also the potential. I must say we do not have tourism as sector number one as a priority, but in all the discussions we are having, and traditionally also the member states of the European Union, traditionally we have tourism very high on the agenda because we have an interest that the tourists that come to Egypt from the European Union are well informed, and these are the tourists also that bring an extra value to the Egyptian society, because you have tourism and tourism. So we get a lot of requests now for ecotourism and for let's say the informed tourists who want to preserve the treasures of the country they visit, who are responsible, who also like to spend money in the country, because that's important also, and not just to have the mass tourist part, which is good, but you should have different layers there. And I think at the European Union the discussions we are having with the different ministries come in. Plus, if I may, you have a very good number of member states, also ambassadors, who very deeply go into the history, the pharaonic history of Egypt, who have through their archaeological exchanges with the Ministry of Antiquities. That's another angle they bring across in those exchanges. So what we call, if you like, cultural diplomacy. It's tourism, it is antiquities, but it's also more about preserving the culture, the very rich culture of Egypt. I must tell you, I'm hungry to have more and more and more information, and I'm trying to share as much as I learn here in Egypt with many, many people. I tell everybody, you can ask my colleagues back in Brussels, I'll tell everybody, come to Egypt, visit this country with the wealth of not just knowledge and experience, but history, and you get so much inspiration from these visits.
Yes, it's every stone has a piece of history behind it and a human being behind it, and that's what's important. It's a lot of human touch. I mean, there is love, there is hate, there is friendship, there is loyalty, there is treason. Everything is there. You just fetch it, and you can find it.
And then the people who are very special, as you know.
Yes, because this what makes this stone so lively is the people. So, talking about investment in Egypt, what are the plans for the European Union to invest? Are there specialities that they're looking for example, like the green hydrogen or whatever, that is the European Union as an entity is trying or helping in the investment in these fields that will be beneficial for both parties?
You see, this is, in fact, in the whole partnership we're having, this is the key of a European Union helping the government to create an investment climate that attracts all kind of investors from the EU. We are the biggest investors for Egypt when it comes to the EU, and you have a whole lineup of investors who would like to come in. Mainly it is in energy and electricity, because under the whole energy package, you mentioned hydrogen, you mentioned blue, green, the whole
wind, of course, a lot of
wind
things.
and solar. It's huge.
Egypt has the biggest solar farm possible. I mean, Yes.
Indeed, and there is still much more out there that is going to happen. I just saw another request for different solar panels everywhere. The point is that the investors want to come in. They need to have the investment climate to operate. It is there. It needs further work, and we do that with the Ministry of Trade and Investment. That's one part. Water. The water sector has been for decades a very important sector for the European Union to help invest in. Construction as well, but I'm really talking about those energy and water who are the key ones, together with transport, that deserve for the moment the biggest interest. Transport, almost all member states invest in transport in Egypt, whether it is on metro lines, a train, different units of mobility, the latest technology that can be applied there. Digital. If you see, and the minister, he explained to me very well on where the priorities are for the government.
Minister Amr, of course, Amr
Talat
is a very overqualified man. Definitely.
He is extremely impressive in how he puts forward the priorities and how he addresses them.
A real cultured person. I know him personally. He's a very good man, definitely, yes.
And it's there. So every time we have these meetings, and I try to do it very often with all the ambassadors of the EU around the table, so they can also go back to the industry, to the investors, and explaining, because a lot is about explaining the possibilities, give the right communication messages, give also for the investors to have, sometimes it goes into very simple things like who is your contact, your direct contact, and you get all the information out there. The current government has worked a lot on digitalizing information for investors in a way that attracts much more. And my last point on it, I could go for hours, but we did last year a huge investment conference under the auspices of President Sisi together with President von der Leyen. And there the industries, European Union industries and Egypt together, they agreed on investment contracts for over 50 billion, actually 49 billion, but it was much more. And it shows what it shows in the whole array of investments, in every sector, and it shows the potential. The potential is huge. You need a good regulatory framework for that. You need to make sure that when investors come in, that dispute settlements are clear. You need to have all the parameters in place where investors feel, okay, this is no risk. Well, risk is always there, but it is less risk than before.
It's a huge market. It's huge,
and
a huge number of working people that can really very economically taking good amount of salaries that are suitable for any investor, right?
But they also need to feel they have the confidence and the trust. So when the EU is there, when the EU is in and helps facilitate investment, sustainable investment, then investors come in much easier because they see already the EU is there. The EU is with guarantees. We give a lot of guarantees out so that banks can come in. It's not just the IFIs, the big financial institutions. It's also the private banks of Egypt to invest more, other banks to actually say, okay, look, the European Union is investing, they give the guarantees, so we can actually take a risk of working on with concessional loans. Nobody likes to lend money, but you need money for investments. We know that as long as the returns are really, really good. So in that state, I think it's, if I may say, Egypt is in this stage of transformation, of addressing the fundamentals in the economy. This is not easy. It's a big challenge, and there are, it's a population of 110 million and more with their guests also in the country. It's a huge challenge, but you have to address those fundamentals in the economy to make sure that investors come with confidence and that you create the jobs on the market.
Before we leave, I think I want to bring two subjects. First of all, I was very happy with what the EU has done in restoration of the Mardini Mosque.
Yeah.
in Al Darb al-Ahmar, and I hope that you go on doing this, because the Islamic architecture in Egypt, one of the richest, 1/3 of the Islamic architecture and trophies are here in Egypt. They need a lot of funding, and you have done a good job of restoration. Will you do that more in more mosques and more areas? Hopefully?
But you know, Dr. Amr, this is only one mosque. Actually, it's a series of a few mosques, and you're right, it's fantastic. But honestly, when I look at the needs there, and we have the joy of walking together
Yes.
and seeing exactly the needs of many mosques and many
Please.
treasures, hidden treasures very
Exactly.
often. And I have this also, I discussed it also with headquarters, that as
That's
European
definitely.
Union, we have to continue to help invest.
This World Heritage.
It's world heritage. I would also call on private sector to look at these. Why do we need to preserve, and what is the importance of preserving our joint heritage? Because this is really
This
joint.
belongs to the human beings.
It
This
belongs
doesn't
to
belong-
everybody.
I mean, Mardini himself was not a pure Egyptian. So,
No.
Maradani, sorry, it's not Mardini, Maradani.
Maradani.
The other point is that on your public page, you have, when you presented your credentials, you said, I am very proud to have met the president today and presented my credentials. So there are a lot of hopes and aspiration of cooperation between you and as an ambassador, and on the personal level with the president himself. So tell us, what are your aspirations and what are you hoping for? I know I've taken a lot of your time, but this will be my final point. So.
But I cannot answer this in 2 seconds.
Of course, no, it's not 2 seconds though. My question is 2 seconds, but you can talk forever, no problem.
No, it's our term is short. This is 4 years, and you want to do as much as possible. And my team know very well, this is a 24/7 operation. Why? I want to mirror also what the government is doing. I'm working with members in government who work 24/7. And also in the private sector, everybody I meet in this country today, there is an energy to address what I said before, those fundamentals. If we can help as European Union, Egypt, to actually put all those pillars in place that the country needs to become, the most thriving country with, the most brilliant citizens, the best functioning economy, then I think we can be proud for forever. There is not much you can do in a short period. Some people say, I am of the opposite view. I think you can do a lot with the right people, with the right responsibility. And I'm humbled actually to be part of this and to contribute as much as we can.
So you're giving, the European Union is giving the full support to our government and to our president to hopefully get the better chances for Egypt, of course.
Absolutely.
Excellency, we'd like, before we leave, that you promise us to come back again, because we need more time to talk to you. Her Excellency Ambassador Angelina Eichhorst, Ambassador of the European Union in Cairo. It was a great pleasure and honor to have you with us in this beautiful afternoon in Cairo. Hopefully we'll see you soon, and wishing you the best of luck. My name is Dr. Amr Mabrouk. Dua Muhammad is at the control. Stay tuned to Radio Cairo, and hopefully we'll see you at the same time, same station next week.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amr. It was a real pleasure.
Real pleasure, our madam.